Hello, and welcome to this video where I talk about things that I find very, very fascinating, and I hope you do too. So, I have a couple notes, but a lot of it is just kind of like things that I've written, not necessarily like notes, because I have this thing. It's called my journal, but anyone could read it. And it's a journal of things that I find fascinating, just, kind of my thoughts on kind of bigger ideas than just kind of my feelings, but more so my feelings on things that I've thought critically about and would feel comfortable sharing. Now, I've only done this for 6 days, and so I have like six little day journals about it, and I think it's pretty fun. I'm not going to read it or anything. You're going to have to wait a lot later before that's going to happen. So, anyways, what I really want to talk about first is how absolutely vital it is to understand where you should be analytical and where you should be a little more idealist in your thinking. And what I mean when I say idealist, what I really mean is that you should use your imagination. You should think about things as non-material versus material when you're a little more analytical. And I'm not, saying that idealism is true or anything. All that I'm arguing is that imagination is absolutely vital if you're going to be analytical. You can't have one or the other. Otherwise, you produce mass delusion or absolute nihilism. And I think that's a lot of the problems is integrating balance within these kind of fundamental principles of thinking. Now, that's different than different schools of thought, you know? So, a lot of the times if you try to like pull out different knowledge from all these different like groups, then you're not really going to have a full understanding of any of these schools of thoughts. But we can orient ourselves by integrating different thought processes that are vital to our biology. And so, from that standpoint, we can kind of take this analytical view and this kind of more idealist, innovator like worldview and kind of mesh them together because they seem like they're different. It's like, oh, imagination and then analytical, which is exactly why they need to balance each other out. And so, a lot of that has to do with who you are as a person. And saying, "Oh, so I was born to be analytical or not?" It's like, well, not necessarily. You develop that way, and now you have to learn a new skill, which is imagination, and that's pretty hard because we have to tap into kind of our childlike wonder and curiosity for that to manifest within ourselves. And in order to do that, one thing, genuine expression. What do you want to express? Think about it. Think truly about what you want to express and externalize. Because oftentimes we take the external and then just spit it right back out. There's no internal processing going on of the external world. Whether we spit out a worldview that we think is correct and what will be socially acceptable. It's like, well, no, you have to take the external world, introspect, process all of these thoughts and ideas, and then externalize the internal processing that you went through. And through that process, your analytical prowess will come in handy. Truly, it will. And then, if you don't want to necessarily externalize it yet, you're still thinking about it. That's where your imagination needs to take over. And you take, my phone fell, and you take these ideas that you've analyzed and critically, structured to then create something new and original. And that, there, once you express that and you put it out into the world, it will be one of the most incredible feelings. I mean, seriously, you will feel like a genius. And it's interesting, how schools don't really teach this. I mean, oftentimes we are just taught to be analytical, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing. Like being analytical is not an issue. But I think balance is the key to understanding this, and I struggled in school a lot because I fall more so as an innovator than I do as an analytic. And because of that, I could take problems that were wrong and I could understand exactly why they could be right. And so that caused a lot of problems for me in school because I was like, well, you could create something that would approximate a reasonable answer from this question or from this, like A, B, C, like even though C is right, I could see how A could work and how we could tweak it a little bit in order for it to fit, the the necessary requirements for it to be correct. And so that caused a lot of problems for me in school because I couldn't just find, oh, this is why it's wrong, this is why it's wrong, this is right. Because my analytical skills were lacking because my brain was just in a complete other dimension, you know, of thought, and was using my imagination to create something approximating a good answer as opposed to being analytical and honing it in. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to develop my analytical skills while still being imaginative. And I think that's where a lot of people fail, is that they go, "Oh, my imagination is so good," and they keep creating these wonderful ideas. And then the people who are analytical are like, "This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. You suck." And it's like, "Whoa, wait, not necessarily. They just haven't been analytical yet, and there is viable truth within the words they speak. It's just surrounded by kind of a fog, right? Because when you take something and you abstract it, there is a whole new dimension there for you to be analytical. But the problem with being analytical is that it only creates something smaller and more simple, which is good. That is a good thing. But when you create a new dimension of thought, you can't disregard an entire new plane of thinking because there are things wrong or things we don't understand within that plane. And that's why you need to have some sort of analytical dialogue with people who are reasonable and will hear you out. Because then, they can kind of, see it from your perspective. Be like, okay, I can see how this works. But what about here? Let's talk about this. You know, there's you have to find reasonable people because there are people who are super prideful who really just want to shut you down, you know? And they'll even shut themselves down. They'll completely hinder themselves for their own pride, which is mind-boggling to me, by the way, like absolutely mind-boggling. And so, I guess what I'm really trying to express is that it has to be you have to have a kind of a dualist idea of thinking where you have the analytical side and imaginative side and then integrate those two together. That is how we should work and how we should function. And a lot of people do this, very intuitively. But for some of us, we either fall on the imagination side or we go into the analytical side. And I think, like a lot of creative people, they just go into art, which is great. That's awesome. But we need people like that in the development of ideas. And we shouldn't have to just leave it to the super geniuses like me, right? Listen, I could do it all, obviously. But, just kidding. I promise I'm humble. That was just a joke. I'm probably the most humble person in the world. That's what they always say, you know? But anyways, I guess it's very Pharisaic and, kind of like how the Pharisees are prideful in what they know, and then will shut anything down that is a new plane of thought that actually pursues greater things than what they know. They're going to completely shut it down because, you have to change. And, it's the temporal parietal junction that has to do with perception. And that is closely related to your ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is a part of your fundamental values. And so, as your fundamental values shift, your perspective also shifts. And that in turn, that process is not a positive one. Usually, it can be a positive experience, but on average, it is a more negative experience, especially if it has to do with your level of competence. If you realize your level of incompetence on something that is trivial, a little more trivial than like let's say God like was like, "Here I am," and you were an atheist. That might even be a little more of a euphoric feeling, but even then the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so it's that fear still in those negative emotions. So on average, you will be experiencing less euphoria and more fear, more disgust, maybe even in retrospection of yourself, you know, to these new fundamental values that you could create and then creating a shift in your perspective, which usually involves negative emotions. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit of like the neuropsychological reasons for why it is hard to choose to be analytical or imaginative, because imaginative is very positive. It's very much outside of the realm of just a self-oriented ego. Being analytical is more so getting to the bottom of, reality instead of abstracting it. And both of those are needed, but you have to learn how to create something out of both. It's hard because, maybe you don't have the IQ for it, which honestly, I know that they say IQ is, kind of predetermined, but there is some degree that you can develop it. And yeah, I don't know if that's 100% true that you can really develop it outside of like maybe 5 or 6 points, you know? But I think you could, man, I would love to say that if you have like an average IQ, you could definitely get it up 10 more points, you know? And if you're at like 110, 115, you're perfect. You can be easily analytical enough while still having an active imagination. The problem is that we do use our imagination. We use it very often, but we use it for social interactions and negative predictions in our life. We don't use it very much for positive ones. Or when we do, it's all dopamine centered, and then we don't live it out, and then we kind of fall into despair again, leading to more negative emotions. And so I guess what I want to say is that you have to realize what you're using your imagination for. If you're using it to just create negative scenarios in your head, then you're completely misusing this fundamental tool that we have been given to use. And it is vital that you shift perspectives there. If you're using your imagination to create negative scenarios in your head and fantasies that will not likely be in actuality, then it's really not going to create anything good for you, like at all. It's really not. And I've had to learn that because a lot of the times, oh man, where I will create an exceptionally well crafted story in my head that I think is going to take place. And it would be very reasonable for that to happen. And guess what? It was negative because it's always negative. And when the scenario actually played out, it was completely normal and fine. And I realized I was just in my own head. But being in my own head implies that I was using my imagination. So now take your imagination and use it for positive things. And that is a lot more effortful. But then once you learn how to shift that perspective and focus on things upwards instead of downwards, I like to use the scenario of like you're climbing up infinite stairs, kind of like Jacob's ladder, but with a little more added to it. So you're climbing up the stairs and you can always look upwards, right? There's always the ability to keep looking upwards. Or you can look down and see how many people are below you, okay? Or see how great the view is from your standpoint, okay? And once you do that, you stop moving up the stairs and your ability to grow stops. And it's really hard to stop appreciating the view because it's a very nice view and you can get very comfortable looking at how many people are below you and how far you've come. Humility is not in thinking less of yourself, but thinking less about yourself. I guess that's really what I'm trying to hint at in our orientation towards creating a better future for ourselves. You can't focus on how far you've come. Just continue the upwards aim. And listen, introspection and understanding where you are, like it's not bad to glance back. But the more you glance back, the more you look. It's kind of like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They look back on the city, turn to salt. You're going to stay stagnant if you do that. You're more likely to. It's like, how far I've come. Now we can stop. It's like, really? You've stopped because you've appreciated how far you've come? You're like, this is far enough. I'm good now. It's like, really? Why would you be content with survival when there's so much more to experience? Like, listen, that's fine. If you worked hard for like a long time and you're ready to settle down and just appreciate the small things, that's wonderful. But the small things are what builds up and creates the bigger picture. And so you needed to be focusing on those small things your entire life in your orientation towards upwards aim. That, my friend, will be the best possible scenario for you to put yourself in while living life. especially if you're trying to be entrepreneurial. I don't think I'm saying that right. Or maybe even be a scientist or a philosopher. Different things like that. If you want to do so, then you must heed the words that I'm saying. Potentially, at least consider them. Okay? And listen, a lot of this is stuff that, people know intuitively, but have yet to even think about, you know? And I think kind of putting into words, I, one of the greatest gifts, I think, is our frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex and the ability for higher order thinking. Like that is insane. Humans are absolutely incredible because of our frontal lobe. Obviously, all brains are beautiful and wonderful, personally, in my opinion. I think like, it's insane. It's insane how they even developed, you know? And I could talk about how, the development of biological organisms shows the characterization of a fundamental substrate that existed to orient biological organisms towards successful integrations of environment. I talk about this a lot. Like this is like the stuff that I find beautiful. And I don't know if like it's not an original thought to me, but I haven't heard anyone who said stuff like this before. And so for me it's like, okay, there it is. There is that imaginative abstraction. Now let's be analytical and dive into it. I'm doing a course on evolutionary interference and as well as, the fundamental biology of, cellular organisms and different things of the sorts. And I'm really excited to dive into biology because it's like I've been so focused on kind of just focusing on, the different parts of the brain, what they do, and stuff of that nature and psychology. Now it's like, okay, let's get into biology, especially the history of biological progression, which is evolution. Whew, that stuff's gonna be super fun. But I guess the stairs are symbolic of kind of what I talk about when I say there is the space in which you can stay that is just knowing truth. It's like you are the 1% of people who know the truth. You have made it. Good job. Now you don't have to do anything else ever again because you know the truth while all of these idiots know nothing. It's like, well, wait a second. Is that really what truth is? Let's look at it from a Platonistic standpoint. You have to instead look at it as a relationship, you know? Because truth is a woman you have to win over. You have to try many things. And it's a one-on-one relationship. And you pursue it. You never stop pursuing it. Because when you stop pursuing someone, then the relationship falls apart. You're not going to have a good relationship with understanding the truth of reality if you stop pursuing the truth of reality. We are not in a place where we can stop. And I'm not talking about from a scientific or philosophical. I'm just talking about it from a perceptual standpoint, from your perceptions and how you should orient yourself psychologically in this crazy world. I mean, seriously, what exists outside of your mental perceptions? Practically nothing that we are aware of. The mind creates not matter, the mind creates what matters. Okay, listen to that again. The mind doesn't create matter, it creates what matters. And that is absolutely vital in our orientation towards our goals in life. And I'm very passionate about this stuff. I think it's so vital. It's so vital. And once you understand that your fundamental values change your perceptions, then you realize how valuable honesty is and genuine expression and taking the external world, internalizing it, processing it, being analytical, and then expand it far beyond what you thought possible. That is the most incredible experience you could ever have. And you shouldn't throw it away for no reason just because it's too much work. It's like really you're going to be using your brain for something. It's just going to be a negative experience. Why not take the work work through your pain so you can experience the pleasures of positive self expression. It is the studies have shown that genuine expression ranks farther up the scale of positive emotions than love itself. Because what is outside of our subjective experience for us as individuals? Absolutely nothing. So stop being altruistic in a negative manner. Stop thinking that the external world is all there is. There is an internal world that you have to take advantage of and shape and orient because that is you. That is your experience. And it is absolutely vital that we allow that change to take process because we want it. We truly want it. We want to aim upwards. I don't see how that could be possible any other way. I'm convinced that in each and every one of us, we want that positive experience. And in order to get that full euphoria feeling, we have to go through the pain, not run away from it, and allow ourselves to be honest, at least with ourselves. You know what I mean? At least be honest with yourself and then express what you want, what you truly want to the world around you. Anyways, that'll be for this video. That'll be it. So, hope you enjoyed. And remember, know nothing, consider everything.